What's better than earning money from a 9-to-5 job? It's earning money while you sleep, which is made possible if you start investing. You're listening to the Real Estate Investing Demystified with your very own dynamic duo, Ava Benisaki and August Biniaz. Tune in as we discuss everything real estate, both on the passive and active sides. We feature life-changing stories of today's real estate leaders that will help build your own roadmap to success. This is a show that will lead you to a diversified portfolio, a much bigger revenue, and a next-level venture that brings you a smooth cash flow. Let's get this episode started. Welcome back to Real Estate Investing Demystified. August and I are back in Vancouver. We've been all around the world at conferences in Vegas, Scottsdale. Where else?
Yeah, Vegas, Scottsdale, and I think our mind has been in Florida. We also have kind of plans to... You're going back to Scottsdale.
I am, for Investor.
For Investor next month.
Yeah.
And then we're going to be in Toronto for the multifamily conference,
That's
which we were very excited about. There's some big news coming up and a little bit of hush-hush now, but we're launching something big. So we're excited about the multifamily conference in Toronto. And yeah, I mean, what else? What's the current event? Yesterday, the Fed raised interest rates by 25 basis points. Yeah. Your eyes are watering a bit.
My eyes are watering. Don't worry about that.
And
it's the bright lights. It's the bright lights.
Yeah, 25 basis points. So they've raised the interest rates 10 consecutive times.
That's right.
And so it's interesting times when it comes to the economy. Banks are failing. GPs are going bankrupt. There's a lot of things happening here. So it'll be interesting to, and today is May 4th, 2023. So if anybody listens to this in the future.
It's a rough time. And particularly that's why we kind of sat on the sidelines while everything was going.
Yes.
The market, the economy was in a little bit of chaos.
Yes.
And we decided to sit on the sidelines.
And you hear sometimes about GPs, this term of capital calls. Their cash flows are so depleted that they actually do a capital call.
That's right.
Thankfully, all of our deals are performing. And yeah, I mean, the interest rates, we're talking about the interest rates being risen 25 basis points and the effects it's having on the economy, on real estate, broadly, particularly commercial real estate, because in commercial real estate, a nominal change in interest rates equates to, negative leverage and negative cash flow, which is detrimental. Whereas in single family, interest rates go up. Some people have certain mortgages that doesn't allow their payments, take their payments higher. Mm-hmm. Also, if somebody buying a home, if their interest rates are a few $100 more, it doesn't really stop them from buying. In some cases it does.
But everything kind of has a trickle effect, right? Because, and we'll get into this, but if somebody's interest rate on their personal home goes up, then they might not be looking to invest much, right? They kind of, they're a little bit, they like to sit back a little bit more, a little bit more hesitant.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about our show today, August. Let's jump into things.
Sure.
This is never spoken about, and it's about the schooling system not talking about financial literacy.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I would have to say that a lot of us have discussed this time and time again, and it's a big problem, I think. So we're really excited to have our guest on today because we're actually going to be discussing that concept. And we'll get right into things.
Our guest is an author and with a special focus on this idea of financial literacy for young adults, children, teenagers, what have you. And the reason this hits home is because we've had over 160 expert guests on our show. Yeah. And we've learned so much from these people investing in real estate. They're in finance. They're thought leaders. Mm-hmm. And we just wish that, we would have learned about this stuff earlier. Even though we were both in business and in real estate for over a decade each, we didn't know about a lot of these tricks of the trade and gambits that people use and different strategies to invest.
Imagine how farther along people could be if they learned about this in the schooling system.
So let's get into it.
Let's get into this. Today we're joined by Doug Allan. Super excited, guys. A little bit about Doug. He's a chartered professional accountant and real estate finance professional with over 15 years of experience in the finance sector. Doug currently works as a VP Finance for Burrard Properties, a developer of multifamily projects in BC and Washington State. So as a father of two, financial education is something Doug prioritizes with his children. So in 2021, Doug released his first book, A Fighting Chance, The High School Finance Education Everyone Deserves. So this book and the social media, blog, and presentation activity that goes with it is designed to provide 17 to 25-year-olds with the financial education Doug wished he was given when he was young. So after all, time is the most valuable asset to us all when building wealth. So August and I believe this interview with Doug will bring great value to parents looking to educate their children on financial literacy and young adults looking to learn how to build wealth and understand their finances for a successful future. So Doug, thank you so much for being on our show. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, we're really excited about this topic. Before we get into everything, can you just give us a quick background? Tell us about your background and your start in real estate, please.
Sure, absolutely. I went to business school at McGill, and I come from a long generation of chartered accountants. I'm actually a fourth generation chartered accountant. So my great grandfather, all the way through to me. And when I graduated, I went into public practice accounting, worked for Ernst & Young, articled there for about 8 years, and then moved into the real estate world. And as I sort of transitioned into being a full-fledged adult and getting into investing, I quickly realized that I had a significant advantage over the average person out there that doesn't have a business degree and doesn't become a chartered accountant and doesn't work in real estate, over the power of knowledge on my own personal financial objectives. And so I sort of saw this almost injustice that there's an education gap between people who take a business route through education and people who don't. So I tried to create a book that would bridge that gap. My entry into real estate was actually a pretty unique one. I was working at Ernst & Young. I was a manager there doing audits and tax and advisory work. And actually, I ended up volunteering on a not-for-profit board for an art gallery in North Vancouver. It's called the Polygon Gallery. And so it happened, this gallery was going through effectively a real estate development. It was in an old building built in the late 1970s, christened by the original Prime Minister Trudeau. And they were about to move to a new facility. And so this was, architectural design, construction financing, construction admin, fundraising, project management. And I was the treasurer on the board throughout this effectively real estate development of this new art gallery. A couple of years later, I was fortunate enough to have Christian Chan of Burrard join the board. And that was that. A couple of years later, he brought me over to his family business, which, as you mentioned, works on multifamily real estate investment. And here I am 7 years later, still.
Tremendous. Let's get right into kind of the discussion where, maybe yourself, just like us and many others, didn't receive the financial literacy in your upbringing, in your household. But now you are a father yourself. So you're obviously not only you're teaching your own children, you're trying to teach many others, not only here in North America, probably around the world. Talk to us about that kind of connection between your upbringing and your own children.
Yeah, and I definitely come from a family that's more business and entrepreneurially inclined. My father was an entrepreneur and ran his own business, and I got a little bit of education at home. But certainly throughout my high school career, there was zero, right? You get a little bit of career planning in terms of writing a resume, interviewing, that sort of stuff. But there was nothing on finance, accounting, investing, inflation, interest rates, credit cards, debt, nothing. So that's what most people are equipped with, right? That's why more than half of Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. That's why nobody has enough saved for retirement. They just never got educated. And I was fortunate enough to get that knowledge through my university and professional career. But you have millions upon millions of people who were never equipped with any skills at all. And I just feel it's not right to have education focused on topics that are important, say science and math and arts and so on. Those are important because brains need to be wired and people need to learn how to learn. But practical skills are important too, right? Learning how to do a tax return, learning how to invest, how to balance your own personal balance sheet. So I just felt someone had to do something. And there have been authors in the past that have tried, certainly one of my mentors in this book and someone I talked with was David Chilton, who wrote The Wealthy Barber. But the advice that I got from a lot of financial literacy authors was, you're on your own. Right, the school system is very much bureaucratic. There's a lot of politics around school curriculums and what they'll put in the classrooms and what they won't and how they can change this topic or that topic to fit something new in. So it was kind of a crusade on my own to figure out how do I get to these 16, 17, 18-year-olds without the school system helping me? Because as you mentioned in the intro, Ava, like time is everything. When it comes to building wealth and investing, if people wait till they're 30, 35, 40 to sort of learn these things, it's too late in many cases. They don't have enough time to grow their wealth.
Got it. And children are usually very distracted as it is. Young adults are very distracted. In today's world with social media and, the internet, there's that distraction is even more. Mm-hmm. How do you spawn the enthusiasm for them to even bother to learn about, investing and financial literacy? Because it is a marathon. It is not a sprint when it comes to investing. And the reward is not there. It's not like they can buy some Bitcoin and it goes from $1 to 10 gazillion dollars, right? It's long-term plan. And that's the issue I had. Anytime somebody told me as a young adult about investing, the plan was always 30 years, 40 years when I retire. I didn't want to even hear about that. I wanted some satisfaction now. Mm-hmm. So how do you create that excitement at this stage for a young adult to even want to listen to you?
Yeah, so I often go into high school classrooms and I try to attack that very topic. And when I do, I try and put things in visual terms and put practical examples in front of them. So one thing I'll often say is, I'll put up a chart of how compounding affects things over time, because ultimately it's trying to show them that one day, it's not now, but one day you can be pretty wealthy. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. So I'll say, hey, if you put $2,000, which any high school student can earn $2,000 in a summer job doing whatever, you put that $2,000 in some index fund, earns 10% for 45 years, then you're talking, you got 150 grand at the end of the time. But if you wait 10 years and you put that same $2,000 in an index fund and you only have 35 years for it to grow, it's only 56 grand at the end. So you've waited 10 years, but you've lost 70% of the ending value. So are you willing to sacrifice, say, buying an Xbox now for buying a BMW 7 Series when you get out of the work world? And there's no right answer. And I try and talk about it's important to live your life now. It's important to have joy and do things that make you happy. But at the same time, you don't want to find yourself in a position where you're getting into your 60s and 70s and you don't have enough money to comfortably live. It's about balance. But you put the images up of like, wow, I can have a cool car. I can probably have a cool house. I can have this amazing lifestyle. And all it takes is a few $1,000s at this point in my life to have potentially hundreds of thousands or millions later.
That's a really good way to put it. I love that. You know, you were kind of mentioning earlier, but kids kind of falter into getting themselves into trouble with student debt, credit card debt, overwhelming kind of home loans, car payments, other expenses, all of this.
If they're lucky, they'll have home loans.
If they're lucky, yeah, especially in Vancouver. But Doug, what do you say to young people who didn't get the education but would like to correct their expenses now, and they get started in and get interested in learning how? And what are the common financial pitfalls that they get themselves into?
One of the things I like to discuss with younger people is that there are a lot of sort of messages that get passed down through generations, through parents, because that's where financial education is coming from, really, right? Is through the household and these messages. And one example that I think needs to be disbanded is that all debt is bad. You should never have debt. You should pay down your house. You should pay off your credit cards. You should pay off your student loans. Just have no debt. And that probably made a lot of sense in the late 70s, early 80s. You have 15, 20% interest rates, pretty punitive. But equipping younger people with the message that no, not all debt is bad. It's a double-edged sword. Of course, there's going to be some debt that's horrible to have on your balance sheet: credit card debt, personal payday loans, debt that you're taking on to buy things like cars and trips. But a lot of debt is really good, and a lot of the wealthiest people out there use debt to create their wealth. So I'm trying to make younger people feel respected and empowered, that they are smart enough to understand these concepts for themselves and use the information as they see fit, and try to disband some of these sort of messages they've been getting from their parents, because economic environments change over time, and certainly we might find ourselves back to a place where interest rates are 20% and all debt is bad debt. But it's about giving them the education. If they can learn calculus, right, they can learn about finance.
Yeah. And the consequences were different as well. I think the older generation debt is such a scary thing, right?
Such a scary thing.
My
dad, we built a home back in good old Fort Saskatchewan, and he got it paid off right away.
Yes.
He was like so proud of it. He's like, we're mortgage free,
Yes.
It was just such a pride thing too for that.
And I think biblically as well, like in religion and stuff, debt is always seen as bad. I think, 1.6 billion Muslims around the world don't believe in charging debt.
Oh, okay.
And that's like, and then also same thing in Christianity as well. It's like debt is, charging debt is shunned upon. But anyways,
I love that Doug said, there's really good debt out there and you got to utilize it. Doug, what are some of the foundational concepts that everyone needs to master when it comes to?
Agreed. Yeah. One of the foundational concepts, which is so front and center these days, is just around inflation. I think whether you're thinking about how much to save or how much to spend or how much to invest or what to do with your money, understanding inflation is so foundational, right? I always show the chart that shows the buying power of a dollar over the last 100 years, right? And it goes to zero, through inflation, whether it's 2% per year, like these governments want to get to, or more like 10% in the last couple of years. Dollars go down and down and down in value every year. And that's the foundation that says, if you're the person that's afraid to invest because you might lose your money, well, you'll definitely lose your money if you put it under your mattress, right? It will happen, right? So creating that sort of sense of urgency, I think is very important, so that students understand that if they don't earn more than inflation on the money that they've earned, then they are technically getting less wealthy every year. If they don't keep their salary growing by an amount that is more than inflation, they're taking pay cuts every year. That's huge, I think, to me. And then, of course, on top of that, compounding, right? Again, this value of time, that this excuse of, I'll just wait until I've got $100,000 salary and I'm 30 years old, then I'll deal with this whole investing and saving for retirement thing. That is just such a flawed theory that I'm trying to disband. And then the third one would be just opportunity cost. Again, another finance concept that's not taught, but it's sort of this concept that every financial decision that you're making, it comes with this invisible cost, right? Opportunity cost, which is effectively what could you have done with that money? So yeah, you could go buy a $200 pair of jeans and you could like it, but your opportunity cost is you could have invested that $200 into the market and created tens of thousands of dollars in your financial future. So as an accountant, maybe I'm just a little stingy, but I never go shopping because I just can't bear the cost to my own financial future of spending money on consumables.
But one more thing about that is also you are sophisticated enough to know about options. Most people don't know about investment options they even have. And, maybe they've gone to their bank and they've been offered certain kind of RRSPs or TFSAs and some very simple investing options. But when you realize about the options that exist out there, this idea of you'd rather invest your money than go and buy things becomes much more realistic.
You want to know what I tell young adults when I talk to them?
Yes.
I literally tell, try, you want them to learn from your mistakes, right? So you're like, learn from my mistakes. And it's like almost painful thinking about, making good money in your 20s. I pivoted to real estate private equity and started learning about investing when I was 30 years old, right?
Yes.
And I always tell them, you can actually buy those beautiful bags that you want to buy and those beautiful jeans off of passive income. So wait for that sacrifice now, and that'll feel so much better in the future. So I always kind of tell that story, and it kind of clicks in with them. I'm like, oh, that's cool, that's possible, and everything else. So
Awesome.
You just gotta connect with them some way, shape, or form. Doug, you kind of recommended that young people take risks. What are these appropriate risks that young people should take, and how does one go about assessing a good risk reward trade-off?
Great question, right? And I always say personal finance is called personal finance because it's personal. And everybody has their own sort of appetite for risk. And this is why investment advisors always go through know your client exercises, right? If you take on a risk where maybe your investment can go up by 30%, but maybe you can also lose 50% of your money. Some folks go, I'm okay with that because I have lots of time and I have appetite for that. And others will go, no way. But from a general standpoint, when you're young and you have 20, 30, 40, 50 years of investment timeline to go, the general advice is take as much risk as you'd like when you're young because you have time to recover from any losses. But then later on in life, when you're 50, 60, 70 years old and you need that money to live on, you have less appetite for risk. So I like to encourage people to take risks. Of course, to an extent, I think right now, a lot of the sort of social media influencers in personal finance world are often peddling these products like, crypto tokens and all kinds of things that come with extreme amounts of risk. NFTs. Yeah. All the digital funny money, right? And there's been some pretty challenging losses taken by a lot of people who put way more than they ever should have into those types of assets. And everyone likes to go to Vegas and play a few rounds at the blackjack table. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But for that piece of your net worth, you just have to be prepared to lose it all. So it's finding this sort of balance of risks and looking at the weighted average of all the risks you're taking. And that's how you build a portfolio that suits your own objectives. It's hard to do that to me. And one of the first chapters of my book is around creating a game for yourself, as I call it, figuring out, okay, how do I want my life to look? When I'm 50, when I'm 60, what do I want to be doing every day? What do I want to be living in? Where do I want to live? What will that cost? Figuring out, hey, maybe I need $2 million when I'm 65 to be able to be comfortably retired and enjoying life. And then work back from there. What does that mean in terms of rates of return that you need, contributions that you need to make? You might find, okay, based on my income, I need to invest at an average of 7% return to get to where I want to be. And 7%, maybe that's 40% in equities that I think can make 10%, maybe a smaller percentage in more fixed income safe stuff, and maybe 5% into like the high risk, early stage companies, effectively penny stocks and crypto and all that sort of stuff. But you need to figure out a work back strategy as opposed to just blindly going, I'll just invest in this stock and that crypto and that property. Why? What plan does it suit?
Yeah, talking about strategies, I want to touch on creating a culture of investing, right? And a strategy really differs depending on what part of life someone is in, right? If somebody is there, in elementary school, in high school, in, when they're going to university, and eventually when they get their first job, like, going up the corporate ladder, are there different strategies for each of those parts of life that you would recommend?
Certainly, the younger you are, the more risk you should have in your portfolio, because the compounding factor, you want your portfolio to grow as fast as it can, as early as it can. And with risk comes reward, generally speaking. So when you're 17 years of age or younger, you should have almost everything you have in higher risk assets. Stocks, equities, index funds that invest in equity markets. Of course, when you're 50 and you have a little bit less time to work with and a little bit less appetite for risk, that should be diversified out. But again, it's personal. And one person might say, hey, I want to have 20 million bucks when I retire. And that means you need to have a much higher rate of return. So you need to necessarily take more risk. And one person might say, no, I'm going to move to Saskatchewan. I'm going to live a simple life and I need 500 grand to retire, which means that maybe you need just a hair over inflation to make that happen. So it's really, really personal.
Yeah. Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. That's a place people can move to save a lot of money. But, and I think this question was more your question, Ava, that we discussed before the show that you were going to ask. But let me ask it because
please do.
I have a few other follow-up questions. But currently, I want to get your thesis or your recommendation on this. We're living in Vancouver where medium home prices somewhere $1.5 million. Medium income is 90,000. Is really becoming impossible for people to own a home. And you see the same thing happening in a lot of places around the world, but it's just the norm, like in Hong Kong or certain places in Middle East or, other areas in the world, big cities, is really near impossible for people to own a home. And Vancouver is becoming the same. What is your recommended strategy to let's say a young couple? I think there was a CBC story on the young couple, Stephanie Williams and Celestian Rins, I believe, that they were trying to, they were renting, but they were saving all their money. So kind of that, should it be, if you're living in Vancouver, one of these high cost living like Toronto, cities around the world, that all your focus should be on saving money to buy your primary residence? Or can someone rent and build wealth from that strategy? What is
and then possibly to retire sooner, but like no eating out, no, like very strict, no cell phones.
It's more about the own or rent thesis, because a lot of people in Vancouver, I used to be in a single family home development, and I used to buy homes from people who owned it for 30 years and they bought the home for 20,000. In Vancouver, you could buy a home for 40 grand. The same home is worth well over $2 million now, right? Wow. So what is the advice there? Should people living in these high cost cities focus on buying their primary residence real estate, be it a condo, be it a home, or should they rent and try to build that nest egg a different way? Like, what is your advice there?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. And, Vancouver has, I think, over $400 billion of residential equity in the city, right? So that wealth is here and it's moving through families. And that's why this market stays very resilient, on top of the fact that it's geographically constrained, right? We have ocean to the west, mountains to the north, border to the south, mountains to the east. So we have to just build up.
An agricultural land reserve, ALR, that you can't build on.
Yes. We have ALR. That's right. Well, we need food. So fair. So for someone who doesn't have that generational wealth, right, that has parents that bought for $20,000 and now have a multi-million-dollar house, what's happening is a lot of the houses being purchased with that generational wealth, right? Parents are passing it down. But for someone that does not have that, benefits of owning a home, certainly in Vancouver, is that it's one of the safest markets for an investment that's on this planet. It's not been called a bubble for 50.
It's been called a bubble for 15 years. So, but yeah,
correct, for sure. And I think one of the great parts about owning a property is that is a forcing function for many to save and build equity in their home. If you own a house, you're going to pay the mortgage, you're going to pay the property taxes, because if you don't, your bank's going to foreclose and you're not going to have a roof over your head. And for a lot of people, that's helpful because they just don't have the willpower or the ability to take the money that would otherwise go to a mortgage and paying principal down and save it. The argument for renting is, assume you have to have a down payment, right? So the whole concept of can I buy or should I rent only really matters if you have a down payment anyway. But let's say you do have a down payment and you do have $100,000 and your options are, I can buy a $400,000 studio apartment in downtown Vancouver, or I can take my 100 grand and I can invest it and rent. That relies on the fact that you do invest that 100 grand in something that appreciates well, like an index fund or a stock. And then any money that you're saving on top of your rent that would otherwise go to, principal and interest payments, property taxes, home maintenance. You're investing that too, because you're going to get taxed on it. I mean, obviously, the principal residence exemption is a huge factor in Canada. All home principal residence gains are tax-free, which is massive, right? With people who have made millions of dollars on their houses and paid zero tax. So there's pros and cons to both. Some jobs are more mobile than others. Some people that work in technology, for example, will bounce around from Vancouver to Toronto to Seattle to New York to LA. And owning a home is challenging because property transfer tax, commissions, transaction costs, and they want more flexibility. So you have to look at your own situation and think, am I going to be in one spot for probably 7+ years minimum to make those transaction costs make sense? And is my ability to control my own financial behavior such that if I don't buy and I'm being forced to funnel my equity into this house, am I going to be diligent with it? Am I actually going to properly invest the difference and grow my wealth that way? Because for a lot of folks, they don't have that diligence and they'll just go buy pairs of jeans and bags and trips.
True.
That's right.
Very true.
Or they'll go to, what's that place called with the waffles and chicken?
Which one?
The one in
Lolo's?
Lolo's chicken.
Lolo's chicken and waffle? That's okay. You can. That's fair money to spend. My favorite.
That's great. Yeah.
All right, let's switch the conversation a bit and talk about, coming out of the demographic of teenagers and looking more and really looking at your kind of past and growth. Went from, Ernest and Young into being the VP of finance in a development company and what have you.
Yeah, he worked at one of the big four accounting firms.
Yes.
And then he pivoted.
Yes. And what is your advice there when it comes, because a lot of times you talked about gurus online pitching about an idea that the consistent message is leaving your W-2, or it's your T4 income as is known here in Canada. In the US is your W-2, but it's this idea of people leaving their job and becoming business owners or having this new gig that gets them to get out of their 9-to-5 type of job. What is your advice there for somebody who just finished university or college and is looking to get into the workforce? Is the plan to, build something, learn the ways of the business and then go on their own? So the idea of going up the corporate ladder, is that still a realistic idea? Like, what is your advice there, since you've been on both sides kind of?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think about this all the time. I'm 37 now, and I'm at a point in my life where, leave the corporate world and go start my own thing. Sure. But I'm also a parent of 2 young kids, and then life is very busy. And I know now, having been in this corporate world now for a couple of decades, that owning and running a business is a 24/7, 365 job. To do it properly and to grow a business and to work on all aspects of it, from finance to strategy to marketing to HR to capital raising, it takes all 7 days of the week. And right now, I'm at a point in my life where my kids are 7 and 10 and they have activities, and my wife is busy, she works. So if I was to do that, I would probably have to make sacrifices on other personal parts of my life. And right now I'm not willing to do that. But I also think that business is complex and it's challenging. The idea of just sort of starting a business and all of a sudden you're making lots of money and it's cash flowing and all life is great. Not always the case. It's important to me to get some experience working for someone else first, particularly in a business that's established and mature and has proper processes and structures and strategies in place, so you can learn. Right? I learn something new every day, and I've been doing this for 15 to 20 years. So I think it's about education to me. And that's why I'm so grateful that I did go through 8 years at Big Four, having dozens of different clients and different industries and talking to different people, learning about different approaches, and now working in real estate, but also working, within development, real estate investment, different asset classes. The more you learn, the better equipped you are when one day you can make a choice to run your own show. But it's personal too. And a lot of folks that are younger and don't have kids yet and don't have those personal commitments, that's a great time to give it a go. But I would definitely advise getting out of college, go work for somebody else and learn. Position yourself as though you're being paid to learn about business, and don't just go to work every day and work your 9 to 5 and go home. Use those opportunities as an opportunity to learn and absorb every piece of knowledge you can, with the thought that one day you'll apply it to your own business.
Great advice.
Because there's no better place to learn. You have to do these things. You can't read books to learn about business and then go start a business without being out there in the world and interacting with lawyers and insurance brokers and consultants and vendors. And you just need to live it to learn it, to me.
That's 100%. The best way to do it. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think we could all agree that real estate, and I'm going to switch back to investing, because I'm looking forward to this question for you, Doug, but I think we can all agree that real estate investing is probably one of the best wealth building strategies out there. And there's a lot of exciting things happening today that are actually enabling non-accredited investors to invest as well, which we're doing some awesome stuff here at CPI Capital with smaller funds so that they can diversify their portfolios to get exposure to real estate investing. Now, Doug, what's your take on alternative investments in commercial real estate and then multifamily syndications?
I obviously love real estate. I work in the industry. I do invest in multifamily syndications myself because I love the scale of them. I've done everything from individual properties, condos, pre-sales, all the way up to investing in, 200 unit multifamily projects with sponsors like yourselves. And my preference is with the larger assets because the vacancy risk becomes much smaller. The scale brings so much efficiency and it's just becomes purely passive to the LP, right? To the investor. Whereas when you buy a single condo, you're the landlord. You're the one dealing with the tenant. If that tenant leaves, your unit is empty and you have zero income coming in. There's just much more risk. So I think it's really important for people to diversify into these assets. And it's wonderful that they're being made more and more available to non-accredited investors. I always, scratched my head that anyone can go buy some crypto token that has extreme amounts of risk and they can go buy a 2-cent penny stock for a junior mining company with no assets. No problem. But investing in an institutional grade, multifamily asset, that's not allowed.
That's too risky. I want to kind of circle back before getting to our next segment of our show, but I want to touch on, obviously you've authored a book. You also talked about, social media, blogs, presentation. What is it that you do? Like, how can someone who listens to this show or watches it and wants their teenage, son or daughter to learn more about finance? Do you offer any services when it comes to that? Is it mainly the book? Talk to us about that part.
Yeah, no, for sure. The whole A Fighting Chance brand or collection of goods is really a two-part thing for me. It was a pandemic project and it was more of a social project than it was a financial one for me. It's about giving back. So I wrote the book. It's available, of course, on Amazon and Chapters and all kinds of different platforms. But I author blogs on my website, fightingchancefinance.com. And I post pretty regularly on my Instagram, which is probably the most active platform where I just have an idea, a concept that's topical, that's in everyone's minds, and I'll post my thoughts about it. And that's been pretty good as well. And then I do presentations as well in high schools, mostly across Vancouver here for sure. And it's interesting that the public schools have been much less willing to have me over than the private schools, which is counterintuitive. But I like to give back. I've done some stuff with Junior Achievement BC, other great organizations focusing on financial literacy. So if there's an opportunity out there for me to get involved, I'll definitely say yes.
Okay, so no monetized actual coaching program yet, possibly in the works. I'll give you a call, Doug, my partner with you on that. All right, awesome. Let's get to the next segment of our show. Thank you for sharing all the wisdom and knowledge, and let's get to the next segment of the show.
Really incredible. Okay, here we go, guys. It's the 10 championship rounds to financial freedom. Doug, whatever comes top of mind, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Are you ready?
Sure.
As ready as you're ever going to be. Okay, first question. Who's been the most influential person in your life?
Wow, big question. It's going to have to be my dad because he took that entrepreneurial plunge. He bought a business and, unbeknownst to me at the time, I was a young child, but he mortgaged the house. He borrowed money and he went and bought this business that was in a really challenging place. I think they were actually in bankruptcy protection. And he bought the business, turned it around, rebranded it, grew it, and made it into this amazing business. And that was just such an inspirational thing for me that pushed me to move towards business as my career choice. And to this day, we still chat about business and finance all the time. And he's a wonderful guy to talk to. And I think, those family connections are so important, right? The conversations you have around the dinner table with your parents and your siblings can really form the foundation of who you become. And he formed me.
Awesome.
That's
awesome.
Beautiful.
What I've noticed about that question is if our guest speakers' wives are even in a 2-mile radius, the answer is always my wife. But when they're a little farther away, the answer changes. But let's go to the next question.
All right, Doug. What's the number one book you'd recommend?
Oh, aside from mine?
Yeah,
yours will be in the show notes, by the way, so
That's
people
right.
can access it.
For me, most of my reading in the evening is fiction reading because all I do all day at work is read agreements and contracts and PSAs and loan documents and all that sort of stuff. But I think when it comes to reading about finance and investing, it's pretty hard to beat the Rich Dad Poor Dad Robert Kiyosaki book. He was a pretty influential guy to me, and I was lucky enough to read that earlier on in my life, along with Wealthy Barber and some other great ones as well. But I don't know, do you guys think that people still read books? Or is everyone an Instagram video viewer now?
Yeah, exactly. Or Chat GPT, right? I just asked Chat GPT.
That's right. That's right. Well, we still try to fit in books. I think it's really important. But yeah, the Purple Bible, a lot of people have said that that's been a big influence in their life.
Changes your mindset, right? Allows you to sort of challenge the status quo of what you've been taught and think about what's the truth about finance.
That's right. All right, Doug, next question. If you had the opportunity to travel back in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
Buy Amazon stock. Oh man. I think if I could go back to when I was getting my first summer jobs, 14, 15 years old, and I was spending every penny that I got on going out with friends, buying. I was a big music guy. I sang in a rock band and stuff. So I was spending all kinds of money on CDs. Man, if I had just put some money into the stock market back then, I would I would be in a far different place than I am now, which is really the impetus for what I've been doing. But I think it's hard when you're young and you're a teenager to really care about your future and put any effort or finances into it. But if I could go back in time, I'd just be shaking myself, kind of going, what are you doing? You're wasting your financial future. Do something. So yeah, just start learning about practical things that can benefit you later, because it makes your life so much easier when you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s.
Absolutely.
100%. Okay, Doug, what's the best investment you've ever made?
I think the highest return I've ever had was actually a pre-sale that I bought in Langford, BC, which is on Vancouver Island, close to here. And I bought the pre-sale in 2017. I think it closed in 2020. I owned it for a year and a half, 2 years, and then sold it. And I was in the hundreds of percent IRR on my equity.
Wow, nice.
Because this was the time when you could borrow on your home equity line of credit for 3%, right? For your down payment, and you could borrow from a bank for the 75 or 80% rest of the loan. So effectively, you're buying a $300,000, $400,000 asset for almost nothing of your own money, and it went up in value like crazy, as you know, as interest rates remain low for the pandemic and real estate values went crazy. You make great amounts of money with nothing invested of your own cash. So it worked out pretty well. The timing of the sale was also great as things slowed down thereafter, but there was risk as well, right? It was not a riskless thing to do, but the returns were pretty wild.
Nice.
Right on.
Nice.
Good to hear. Now, what's the worst investment you've ever made, and what lessons did you learn from it?
I definitely, in the early days of cannabis legalization in Canada, I was pulled into making a couple bets on some of the early stage cannabis stocks, which skyrocketed originally, but then just tanked, just came way back down to earth, right? And it was a total hype, speculative thing to do. It was like lottery, sort of gaming. These businesses, they didn't have income, they didn't have cash flows, their balance sheets were weak, yet their valuations were in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. And I got caught at the tail end, not making much money, and in some cases losing money. And the lesson was, speculative investments that you make without due diligence, without underwriting balance sheets, without looking at management, without looking at cash flows, coming up with a proper valuation, they're gambling, right? And that's fine. A little bit of your portfolio for that is fine, but you better be prepared to lose money.
Right. Okay, next question. How much would you need in the bank to retire today? What's your number?
Ooh, I live in Vancouver, Ava. A house here, as you mentioned earlier, is a livable house with a yard, and that works for a family, is $2-3 million. I'm 37 and I have 70 years probably to live. I'm a believer in healthcare continuing to accelerate, and I'll probably live north of 100.
Nice.
So if I need 70 years of income, it's millions. I think it's many millions actually. I think probably for me to hang up the cleats right now and stop working and feel comfortable to sleep at night, probably $10 million, to be honest.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
We've got that number many times before.
I like that. He's what is Centurion? Is that what it's called?
Centurion.
Centenarian.
Or however you pronounce it.
Living to be your
people
hundred,
want to be
in your
they're gonna live
hundreds.
to be in their hundreds. I'm not sure how you say
I
it.
think this is so important for people to be thinking about, right? Because right now, this very moment, life expectancy for people is late 70s, maybe early 80s. But even one generation ago, 2 generations ago, it was even less than that. We're accelerating the expected life of human beings pretty rapidly here. So in 60 or 70 years from now, maybe the average life expectancy is 95, 100, 105. And being financially prepared for that has serious consequences. If you intend to retire at 60 or 65, you may have 40 years of no income life to live and enjoy. So you do your math and you work back on the amortization of what you need to enjoy 40 years of an enjoyable lifestyle. It's a big number.
Good point. Good point. All right, Doug, if you could have dinner with someone dead or alive, who would it be?
They are alive, and it's a little embarrassing, but it would be Patrick Stewart. I'm a massive, massive Star Trek fan. My wife always makes fun of me for it. But yeah, Captain Picard of the Starship Enterprise would just be unbelievable for me.
In character or just out of character?
Out of character. He's a phenomenal guy. He's done X-Men, he's done Shakespeare. He's a really interesting guy.
Okay, right on. Okay, Doug, if you weren't doing what you're doing today, what would you be doing now?
I love what I do now, to be honest. I think in a different life, I would really enjoy working with my hands. You know, when I go to construction sites that we work on, development sites, and I see these guys out there, you know, framing and building and creating homes for people, I think I would really enjoy that side of things. You know, there's obviously pros and cons to working in an office and sort of a more white collar career versus being out in the field, but I think I would really enjoy actually building with my hands.
Very cool.
Nice. And that's not artistic. We're talking about trades. He's talking about, all right.
All right.
No, I don't do art.
All right, cool.
Okay, my favorite question, book smarts or street smarts?
Street smarts all day long. You know, obviously books are important, as I wrote one, and it's important to supplement knowledge at all times with whether it's a book or it's a podcast or it's a TV show or a documentary, whatever. Learning in general is always good, but there is no replacement for living it, right? And getting out there, getting experience, talking to people, getting real life examples that you can use to build on and grow yourself personally and professionally. So yeah, street smarts all the way. And, you know, I think some of the most successful billionaires out there dropped out of school and did wonderful things. So it's a balance, but if I had to pick one, it's street smarts.
Right on. Love that. Doug, last question. If you had $1 million in cash and you had to make one investment today, what would it be?
Today is a very challenging time to answer that question.
Yeah.
In recent times, real estate might take a little longer. So like, let's say in a very close, somewhat near future type of thing, let's say.
If you asked me that question a year ago, before the last 10 rate hikes, I would say all day long I'll go buy $3 million of real estate. I think that the answer still remains these days. There's certainly fewer deals to buy because there's fewer sellers willing to sell these days. But I think in the next 6 to 12 months, I think we'll be seeing a lot of amazing opportunities in the market to acquire. And I would go south of the border. I do think that multifamily real estate is best in the United States. And I'd probably buy into a market with stable cash flows, right? There's so many approaches when it comes to real estate. You know, you can say I'd buy real estate, but where, what kind, what grade, what typology, what neighborhood? And I think I would go with sort of something that has a cap rate that produces cash flow, right? Cash flow is king. If you can find a fixed rate of interest on your debt and you can cash flow from it, then you're able to hold over long periods of time, no matter what happens to the value. That's sort of where my risk profile lies. I'm less of the guy that's willing to go and buy the $2,000 per square foot condo in downtown Vancouver that has no chance in hell of ever cash flowing, but banking on hopefully getting some appreciation. That's not me. I'd rather run an actual real estate business where there's a business plan, an improvement plan, forced appreciation through improvements to cash flow and stability.
We see eye to eye on that, Doug.
Awesome.
Yes.
Doug, last thing, what's the best way people can reach you?
Certainly my website for the book is the best place to start, which is afightingchancefinance.com. I'm big on LinkedIn, on Instagram as well. So look me up. Doug Allan, CPA, CA.
Awesome.
And that's Allan with 2 L's.
Yes.
Really, 2 L's and an A. That's right.
Really appreciate your time, man. Thank you for coming here, sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And
this has been really great, Doug. Thank you so much.
It's been great. Yeah, we're going to definitely have your book as one of our top books to recommend and educate ourselves.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We hope this conversation enlightened you on how to win big in this highly profitable and risk-averse space. Get on your feet and embrace this world that offers so many opportunities just waiting for you out there. Continue your journey to becoming a savvy real estate expert by subscribing to the show at cpicapital.ca. Don't forget to leave a positive rating and share with your friends. See you on the next one.